The knife scraped against ceramic as my wife Elior carved her salmon into perfect little squares, each piece exactly the same size. 32 years of marriage, and she still ate like she was performing surgery. "You're awfully quiet tonight, David," she said without looking up from her plate. The dining room felt cavernous around us, all that expensive furniture she'd insisted on buying last year creating islands of pretension in our modest home. I took a sip of wine, the good stuff she'd opened to celebrate her promotion at the marketing firm. "Just thinking about what I'll do when I'm a bachelor again." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Then she laughed, that tinkling sound she made when she thought I was being adorable. "Oh, David, you're so dramatic, right? Because noticing your wife's sudden interest in working late, her new wardrobe of clothes that cost more than my monthly take from the real estate office, and her habit of texting someone at all hours was being dramatic. How was work today?" I asked, playing the dutiful husband. "Busy. Very busy." She dabbed her lips with the cloth napkin. Cloth, because paper was apparently beneath us now. "I might have to work late again tomorrow. Big client presentation." "Which client?" "You wouldn't know them." Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and I caught the flash of a smile before she flipped it face down. "Just work stuff." Work stuff at 9:30 at night. Sure, our daughter Sydney had been home from college last weekend, and she'd made an offhand comment that stuck with me like a splinter. "Mom seems different lately. Happier, I guess, like she's got some secrets. In a town like Millbrook, population 8,400, secrets had a shelf life of about 15 minutes, unless you were really good at keeping them, or really good at hiding in plain sight. I'd been running Hartwell Real Estate for 23 years, ever since Dad passed and left me the business. It wasn't glamorous, small-town properties, the occasional commercial lease, helping young families find their starter homes. But it was honest work, and it kept us comfortable. Or it had, until Elior decided comfortable wasn't enough anymore. "David, are you listening to me?" I blinked. She was staring at me with those green eyes that used to make my heart race. Now they just looked impatient. "Sorry, long day. What were you saying?" "I was saying that Johanna thinks we should take a vacation. Somewhere tropical. She went to Aruba last month and said it was divine. Johanna Patterson, Elior's best friend since high school. Divorced twice, currently working on husband number 3. Her idea of relationship advice was like getting driving lessons from someone who'd totaled every car they'd owned." "Sounds expensive," I said. "We can afford it." "My raise?" "Your raise doesn't cover Aruba." Her jaw tightened. "Maybe if you put some effort into expanding the business instead of just coasting." "Coasting?" I set my wine glass down harder than necessary. "I've been building that business since before you knew what a marketing demographic was." "That's not what I meant." But her tone said it was exactly what she meant. We finished dinner in silence, the kind of quiet that felt like pressure building behind a dam. Elior loaded the dishwasher with sharp, efficient movements while I retreated to my home office, the one room in the house she hadn't redecorated. I pulled up the business accounts on my laptop, but the numbers blurred together. Instead, I found myself thinking about this morning when I'd grabbed Elior's coffee mug from the counter to rinse it. There'd been a receipt crumpled inside, the Pineview Motel out on Route 9, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. When I'd asked her about it, she'd said it was from showing a property to a client who was very particular about privacy. The Pineview was 12 miles from any property we had listed. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Mike Brennan's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, Mike?" "David, you sound like hell. Come down to the Anchor. I'll buy you a beer." Mike owned the Rusty Anchor, the kind of dive bar where the locals went to forget their troubles and remember their grudges. He'd been my best friend since high school, back when we'd both thought we'd conquer the world. Now we were just trying to survive it. "Can't. Elior's what? Going to miss you? She's been at the Anchor 3 times this week, and not with you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What? Tuesday night, Thursday night, and Saturday afternoon? Sitting in the corner booth with that grease monkey from Kowalski's auto? Ray Kowalski. I knew him by reputation, smooth talker, flashy dresser, the kind of guy who wore gold chains and called women sweetheart. He'd inherited the auto shop from his old man and somehow managed not to run it into the ground, though rumor had it he was. Better at charming customers than fixing cars. You sure it was her?" "David, I've known your wife for 30 years. It was her." I closed my eyes. "I'll be right over." The Rusty Anchor squatted on Harbor Street like a barnacle on a pier, all weathered wood and neon beer signs. Inside, it smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams, despite the smoking ban that had been in effect for a decade. Mike was behind the bar, polishing glasses with the methodical precision of a man who'd been doing it for 20 years. He'd been a cop before buying the Anchor, and he still carried himself like one. Straight-backed, alert, ready for trouble. Usual? He asked as I slumped onto a bar stool. Make it a double. He poured 2 fingers of bourbon and slid the glass across the scarred wooden bar. Want to talk about it? What's to talk about? My wife's screwing around with some mechanic, and apparently the whole town knows about it except me. Maybe it's not what you think. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right. She's probably just getting her oil changed. 3 times a week. Mike leaned against the bar, his expression serious. What are you going to do? I don't know. I took a sip of bourbon, felt it burn down my throat. Confront her, I guess. Ask for the truth. And if she lies, then I'll know where I stand. But even as I said it, I knew I was fooling myself. I already knew where I stood. The question was what I was going to do about it. The next morning, I woke up alone. Elior's side of the bed was cold, the sheets barely disturbed. A note on her pillow read, Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. E. Don't wait up, like I was some lovesick teenager instead of her husband of 3 decades. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at our backyard. We'd planted those rose bushes together 15 years ago, back when we still did things together. Now they were overgrown and wild, like everything else in our marriage. My phone buzzed, a text from Sydney. Dad, is everything okay? Mom called me crying last night. Crying. About what? Getting caught or having to sneak around? I texted back, everything's fine. Focus on your studies. But everything wasn't fine, and we both knew it. At the office, I tried to lose myself in work. Mrs. Henderson wanted to sell her Victorian on Elm Street, and the Johnsons were looking for something with a big yard for their kids. Normal problems with normal solutions. The kind of life I used to have. Around noon, my secretary Janet poked her head into my office. David? There's someone here to see you. Ray Kowalski filled the doorway like he owned it. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with dark hair slicked back and a smile that probably worked on women who didn't know better. He wore jeans and a leather jacket that looked expensive, and his boots had steel toes. Working man's clothes with a player's attitude. Mr. Hartwell? Ray Kowalski. Mind if I come in? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. What can I do for you, Mr. Kowalski? Ray, please. He settled into the chair like he was getting comfortable for a long chat. I hear you're the man to see about commercial properties. Depends what you're looking for. Bigger space for my shop. Business is booming, you know? Sometimes I can barely keep up with demand. His smile widened. Course, I got help now. Real good help. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I see. What kind of space did you have in mind? Something with character. Class. Like that place on Harbor Street next to the Anchor. You know the one? I knew it. Prime real estate, expensive as hell. Well, that's a little out of most people's price range. Good thing I'm not most people. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with dark eyes. I got resources you might not expect. Resources, like my wife's salary. I'll need to see some financial documentation before we can move forward, I said, keeping my voice level. Bank statements, credit reports, that sort of thing. Sure, no problem. He stood up, straightening his jacket. I'll have my business partner? Bring them by later. You'll like her. Real classy lady. My hands clenched into fists under the desk. I'm sure I will. After he left, I sat staring at the door for a long time. The bastard had balls, I'd give him that. Coming into my office, talking about my wife like she was his business partner, making sure I knew exactly what was going on. That evening, I drove past Kowalski's auto on my way home. Elior's BMW was parked behind the building, tucked away where most people wouldn't see it. But I saw it, and I made sure to remember exactly where it was. At home, I found Elior in the living room, reading a magazine. She looked up when I walked in, and for a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance at being interrupted. How was work? She asked. Interesting. Had a potential client come by, Ray Kowalski. You know him? Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. The name sounds familiar. Why? He's looking for commercial space, says he has a business partner helping him out, someone with class. That's nice for him. Yeah, real nice. I sat down across from her, studying her face. Elior, is there something you want to tell me? She set down her magazine, her hands trembling slightly. Tell you about what? About where you've been spending your time. About who you've been spending it with. For a moment, I thought she might confess. Her mouth opened, and I could see the words forming, but then her expression hardened. I don't know what you're implying, David, but I don't like your tone. My tone? My tone is the least of your problems right now. Are you accusing me of something? I'm asking you a direct question. Are you having an affair? The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Finally, she stood up, smoothing down her skirt. I don't have to listen to this. You're being paranoid and cruel, and I won't stand for it. She walked toward the stairs, then paused. Maybe you should ask yourself why your wife might need to find companionship elsewhere. When's the last time you took me anywhere nice? When's the last time you made me feel special? When's the last time you acted like you wanted to be here? But she was already gone, her heels clicking on the hardwood stairs like a countdown timer. I poured myself a bourbon and sat in my office, thinking. Ray Kowalski wanted to play games? Fine. I'd been playing the real estate game in this town for over 2 decades. I knew every property owner, every banker, every city council member. I knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. And I was about to teach a cocky mechanic and my cheating wife that some games have consequences they never saw coming. My phone rang. Mike again. David, you need to get down here. Now. What's wrong? Just get here. And David, you might want to bring a camera. The Rusty Anchor was packed for a Wednesday night, which in Millbrook meant about 30 people instead of the usual 15, but tonight felt different. The conversation was louder, more animated, and it all seemed to center around the corner booth where Elior sat across from Ray Kowalski. They weren't trying to hide anymore. Ray had his arm draped across the back of the booth, his fingers playing with the ends of Elior's hair. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in years. How long have they been here? I asked Mike, keeping my voice low. About an hour. They've been putting on quite a show. Mike's jaw was tight with anger. Ray's been buying drinks for half the bar, telling everyone how he's about to expand his business. Says he's got a silent partner with deep pockets and good connections. A silent partner. My wife. I watched them for a few more minutes, my phone recording everything, Ray's hand on her thigh, the way she leaned into him when he whispered in her ear, the complete lack of shame on either of their faces. David, Mike's voice was warning. Don't do anything stupid. But I wasn't feeling stupid. I was feeling clear-headed for the first time in months. I walked over to their booth, my footsteps steady and sure. They looked up as I approached, and I saw Ray's smile widen. He was enjoying this. Evening, folks, I said pleasantly. Mind if I join you? Elior's face went white. David, what are you doing here? Having a drink with my wife and her business partner. I slid into the booth next to Ray, close enough that he had to move over. Ray here was telling me about his expansion plans. Sounds expensive. Nothing I can't handle, Ray said, but some of his cockiness had faded. Really? Because I did a little research today. Kowalski's auto has been operating in the red for the past 2 years. 3 liens on the property, 2 judgments from suppliers. I smiled at him. Doesn't sound like the kind of business that can afford prime real estate. Ray's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about, old man. Old man? I laughed. That's funny. Because this old man just bought the note on your shop. From the bank. This afternoon. The color drained from Ray's face. You're lying. Am I? Call First National tomorrow morning. Ask for Tom Patterson. He's the loan officer. Good friend of mine. We play golf together. I leaned back in the booth, enjoying the moment. Funny thing about buying distressed debt. You can get it for pennies on the dollar. Elior found her voice. David, you can't... Can't what? Can't protect my interests? Can't make business decisions? I looked at her, and she flinched at whatever she saw in my eyes. You're right. I should have done it sooner. Ray stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over. You're absolutely right, I said. It's not. He stalked out of the bar, leaving Elior sitting across from me like a deer in headlights. David, please. Let me explain. Explain what? How you've been using our joint account to fund your boyfriend's business. How you've been lying to me for months. How you've been making a fool of me in front of the entire town. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are you going to do about it? She wiped her eyes with a cocktail napkin. I want a divorce. The words should have hurt. A month ago, they would have destroyed me. But now they just felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Fine, I said. But you're not getting half of everything. Not after this. The law says a lot of things. It also says that adultery affects property distribution. And I've got plenty of evidence. I stood up, dropping a 20 on the table. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Elior. It's going to be one of your last good ones for a while. The next morning, I was in my office early, making phone calls. The first was to Jim Morrison, the best divorce attorney in the county. The second was to every property owner in town who might be thinking of renting to a newly single woman with a questionable reputation. By lunch, Elior had called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Around 2 o'clock, Sydney walked into my office. She looked tired and worried, her college sweatshirt wrinkled like she'd slept in it. "Dad, what's going on?" Mom called me crying, saying you're trying to ruin her life. "Sit down, honey." I gestured to the chair Ray had occupied the day before. "We need to talk." I told her everything. Not the ugly details, but enough so she'd understand. Sydney listened without interrupting, her expression growing more and more troubled. "I can't believe Mom would do this," she said finally. "I couldn't either. But here we are. What happens now? Now your mother and I get divorced, and we all try to move on with our lives." Sydney was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than 22. "Dad? I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For not just rolling over and taking it. For fighting back." That evening, I drove past Ray's auto shop. The lights were off, and there was a notice posted on the door. Temporary closure due to financial restructuring. I smiled and drove home. Elior was waiting for me in the kitchen, her suitcases packed and sitting by the door. "I'm staying at Johanna's," she said without looking at me. "Good. That should give you plenty of time to plan your next move." She looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. "Oh, by the way, I changed the locks. And the security codes, and I canceled your credit cards." "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. They're in my name. From my business accounts." I took a sip of beer. "Amazing how much financial independence you lose when you're not actually earning the money you're spending." She grabbed her suitcases and headed for the door, then turned back. "This isn't over, David." I smiled at her, the same smile I'd given Ray the night before. "You're absolutely right. It's not." 3 weeks later, Ray Kowalski's auto shop was officially closed. The bank had foreclosed on the property, and Ray had disappeared. Some said he'd gone to Boston, others claimed he'd headed south. Nobody seemed to know for sure, and nobody seemed to care much either. Elior was still staying at Johanna's, which was working out about as well as anyone with half a brain could have predicted. Johanna Patterson was the kind of friend who was great for commiseration and terrible for actual support. She'd been through 2 messy divorces herself, and her advice seemed to consist mainly of, take him for everything he's worth, and all men are bastards. I was in my office on a Friday afternoon when Janet buzzed me. "David, there's a woman here to see you. Says it's about the Kowalski property." "Send her in." The woman who walked through my door was about 50, well-dressed but not flashy, with graying brown hair and intelligent eyes. She had the look of someone who'd been around long enough to spot bullshit from a mile away. "Mr. Hartwell? I'm Patricia Kowalski, Ray's mother." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Mrs. Kowalski, what can I do for you? You can tell me why you destroyed my son's business." Her directness caught me off guard. I'd expected tears or threats, not this calm confrontation. "Your son's business was already failing, Mrs. Kowalski. I just accelerated the inevitable. Because he was sleeping with your wife. That was certainly a factor." She nodded, as if I'd confirmed something she already knew. "Ray's always been too smart for his own good, and too stupid to see the consequences." "I'm not sure I follow." "My son is a lot of things, Mr. Hartwell, but he's not a homewrecker. At least he wasn't until your wife started coming around." I leaned back in my chair. "Are you saying this was Elior's idea?" "I'm saying your wife pursued my son like a heat-seeking missile. Came into the shop with car problems that didn't exist. Started bringing him lunch. Offered to help him with his business problems." Patricia Kowalski's mouth tightened. "Ray's not the brightest bulb, but he's not evil. Your wife, on the other hand. Go on." "She told him you were abusive, that you controlled all the money and wouldn't let her have any independence. Said she was afraid to leave because you'd threatened to ruin her." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not true." "I figured as much. Abusive men don't usually let their wives drive around in $60,000 cars." She leaned forward. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm not here to defend what Ray did. Sleeping with a married woman was wrong, and he's paying for it. But I thought you should know that your wife isn't the victim she's pretending to be." After Patricia Kowalski left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking. Elior hadn't just cheated on me. She'd manipulated Ray into it, using lies about our marriage to justify her actions. And now she was probably telling the same lies to anyone who'd listen, painting herself as the wronged party. That evening, I drove to Johanna's house. It was a small ranch in one of the newer developments, the kind of place that looked nice from the street but felt hollow inside. Elior's BMW was in the driveway. Johanna answered the door, her expression immediately turning hostile when she saw me. "David, what do you want?" "To talk to my wife." "She doesn't want to see you." "I'm sure she doesn't. But we need to discuss the divorce settlement." Johanna hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. Elior was sitting in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand and a wounded expression on her face. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw her practicing the victim routine in real time. "David, I didn't expect to see you. I had an interesting conversation today with Patricia Kowalski." The color drained from Elior's face. "I don't know what she told you, but she told me the truth. About how you pursued Ray, about the lies you told him." I sat down across from her, noting how she shrank back in her chair. "Abusive, Elior? Really? You are abusive. You control everything. You never let me make decisions." "I never let you make decisions? You redecorated the entire house without asking me. You bought a new car without discussing it. You opened credit accounts in my name and ran them up to the limit. I kept my voice calm, reasonable. The only thing I controlled was how much of my money you could spend behind my back." Johanna appeared in the doorway. "I think you should leave, David." "Actually, Johanna, I think you should hear this too. Since you're harboring a fugitive and all." "A fugitive? That's ridiculous." "Is it?" "Elior's been using joint accounts to fund Ray's business. That's theft. She's been forging my signature on loan documents. That's fraud. And she's been telling people I threatened her, which is defamation." I smiled at both of them. "I've got documentation for all of it." Elior set down her wine glass with shaking hands. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Want to find out?" The silence stretched between us. Finally, Elior spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "I want you to sign the divorce papers. No contest, no demands for alimony, no claims on the business or the house. In exchange, I won't press charges." "That's blackmail." "That's justice." I stood up, straightening my jacket. "You've got 24 hours to decide." After that, I called the district attorney. I walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Elior?" "Stop telling people I was abusive, because if I hear that lie one more time, our deal is off." The next morning, Jim Morrison called me at the office. "David, your wife's attorney just called. She wants to accept your offer." "All of it?" "Every term. No contest divorce, no alimony, no property claims. She'll sign the papers this afternoon." I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt like relief. After 32 years of marriage, it was finally over. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more person who needed to learn that actions have consequences. The Millbrook Community Center was packed for the annual town meeting. It was the kind of event that usually drew maybe 50 people, mostly retirees with nothing better to do and business owners looking to network. But tonight felt different. Word had gotten around that there might be some drama, and in a town like Millbrook, drama was better than cable television. I sat in the back row, watching people file in. Mrs. Henderson from Elm Street. The Johnsons, still looking for that house with the big yard. Mike Brennan, who'd closed the Anchor early to be here. Even Patricia Kowalski had shown up, nodding at me from across the room. Elior and Johanna sat near the front, their heads together in whispered conversation. Elior had signed the divorce papers that afternoon, but she was still putting on the Wounded Victim Act for anyone who'd listen. According to the gossip mill, she was telling people that I'd forced her into an unfair settlement through threats and intimidation. Mayor Davidson called the meeting to order, running through the usual business, budget reports, zoning variances, complaints about potholes on Harbor Street. I waited patiently, knowing my moment would come. "Is there any new business?" Davidson asked, glancing around the room. I stood up. "I'd like to address the community, if that's all right." Davidson looked surprised, but nodded. The floor recognizes David Hartwell. I walked to the front of the room, noting how Elior's face had gone pale. She whispered something to Johanna, who looked equally alarmed. "Thank you, Mayor Davidson. I know this is unusual, but I felt the community deserved to hear the truth about recent events involving my family." The room was dead quiet. Even the kids in the back had stopped fidgeting. "As most of you know, my wife and I are getting divorced. What you might not know is why." I paused, letting the anticipation build. 3 months ago, I discovered that Elior was having an affair with Ray Kowalski, the owner of the auto shop on Harbor Street. A murmur ran through the crowd. Elior started to stand, but Johanna pulled her back down. "Now, affairs happen. People make mistakes, marriages fall apart. That's life." I shrugged. But this wasn't just an affair. Elior used our joint accounts to fund Ray's failing business. She forged my signature on loan documents. She lied to Ray about our marriage, telling him I was abusive and controlling. The murmur grew louder. I saw Mrs. Palmer, the town's biggest gossip, frantically taking notes. But the real kicker? She's been telling anyone who'll listen that I forced her into an unfair divorce settlement through threats and intimidation, that I'm some kind of monster who destroyed her life out of spite. Elior finally found her voice. "David, stop this. Please?" I looked at her, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. She looked small and frightened, nothing like the confident woman who'd been laughing in Ray's arms just a few weeks ago. The truth is, Elior chose to have an affair. She chose to steal money from our accounts. She chose to lie about our marriage to justify her actions. And when she got caught, she chose to play the victim instead of taking responsibility. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila folder. I have bank records showing the unauthorized transfers. I have photographs of Elior and Ray together at the Rusty Anchor. I have sworn statements from witnesses who heard her lies about our marriage. I set the folder on the podium. Everything's documented. Everything's true. The room was completely silent now. Even the kids had stopped moving. I'm not telling you this to embarrass my soon-to-be ex-wife. I'm telling you because this community deserves to know the truth. Because lies have consequences. And so do the people who tell them. I looked directly at Elior. You wanted everyone to think you were the victim in this story. But victims don't steal from their husbands. Victims don't manipulate young men into affairs with lies about abuse. And victims don't try to destroy their spouse's reputation when their own actions come to light. Elior was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But I wasn't done yet. There's one more thing you should all know. The reason Ray Kowalski's business failed wasn't just because of bad management. It's because Johanna Patterson has been embezzling money from it. Every head in the room turned toward Johanna, who had gone white as a sheet. That's right. Johanna wasn't just enabling my wife's affair. She was stealing from Ray's business accounts. She had access because she was doing his books, and she's been skimming money for months. I smiled at her shocked expression. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? I've been doing business in this town for over 20 years. I know how to follow a paper trail. Johanna stood up abruptly. That's a lie. I never... Sit down, Johanna. The voice came from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see Detective Frank Morrison, Jim's brother, standing in the doorway with two uniformed officers. Johanna Patterson, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. The room erupted in chaos as the officers moved forward to arrest Johanna. People were shouting questions, chairs were scraping against the floor, and cameras were flashing as everyone tried to capture the moment. Through it all, I stood at the podium, watching my wife's best friend being led away in handcuffs. Elior was sobbing hysterically, finally understanding that her support system had just collapsed around her. Mayor Davidson was banging his gavel, trying to restore order. Meeting adjourned. Everyone please exit in an orderly fashion. But nobody was listening. They were all too busy talking about the biggest scandal to hit Millbrook in decades. I walked back to where Elior was sitting, still crying. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do this to me?" "I didn't do anything to you, Elior. You did it to yourself." I leaned down so only she could hear me. "You asked me once why I was so quiet at dinner. Remember? I told you I was thinking about what I'd do when I was a bachelor again." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Well, now you know." I straightened up and walked toward the exit, where Mike was waiting for me with a beer and a grin. "Feel better?" he asked as we stepped outside into the cool night air. I thought about it for a moment. The divorce was final. Ray was gone. Johanna was going to prison, and Elior would have to live with the consequences of her choices for the rest of her life. "Yeah," I said, taking the beer. "I feel like a bachelor again."